Action.
All right. So, Bill Weinrich is my name. I did this academy business for a long time, 21 years, before I finally decided, well, okay, time to try something else. And so now I live on a 25-acre place in the mountains of western North Carolina. Right now there are 4 kinds of warblers singing in my yard. There are 9 kinds of trillium blooming. Trilliums are wildflowers. There's all kinds of trees bursting out in leaves. I've got 10 chickens waiting for me to see what's going on with them. I've got 9 raspberry plants, 25 strawberries, and 8 blueberries plants coming in the mail. They'll be there when I arrive. And I've already got the land set. I've got the gardens dug, I've got the mulch in, I've got it mounted up the way I want it ready, you see. I live 11 miles from town, but 11 miles takes about 35 minutes to drive because the mountains are all shaped like this. And if you're just this far, this side of this, it's straight up and you can run into something hard. Or if you're just this far, that side of this, you're off the edge and down there in the river. And so, anyway, it's all right with me. I live all by myself, me and my wife and my dog and my chickens and my birds and salamanders and squirrels and stuff. And I come down here and I see all this concrete and all this traffic. And I wonder, how did I do this for as long as I did? Happy Earth Day. I know it was last Monday, but it's still Earth Week. The very first Earth Day was 49 years ago. And one of the things that happened to try to help focus people on concern for the environment was called the National Teach-In. And college students from around the country went into high school classrooms, by invitation of course, and tried to explain something about the state of the environment, what's happening to it, why it's important to take care of it, how to do all that stuff. And I was one of those college students. So I've been doing Earth Day since the very first Earth Day. And I've been thinking about how to get people motivated and prepared to have a positive impact on the environment for as far back as I can remember. I started bird watching when I was in 9th grade. By the time I was in 10th grade, I was leading field trips for the Everglades Audubon Society. I was the youngest bird watcher I knew at the time. All the other bird watchers I knew were gray-haired old ladies in pretty flowery dresses. And so, I guess in ways I was kind of ahead of things. A few years after my first experience with high school kids, I found myself as director of Morningside Nature Center in Gainesville, Florida. I was in my 20s. My daughter had just been born, and so I was 26, I guess. And I was hired to set up a nature center at Morningside Park. 280 acres of the most beautiful pine forest habitat, longleaf pine flatwoods, that you could possibly imagine. It had never, ever, 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 ever been clear-cut. Only individual trees had been taken out a few times over the history of the years. It had never, ever, ever been plowed. You have no idea how hard it is to find any place in Florida, any place in the United States that has never been clear cut and never been plowed. And there it was inside the city limits of Gainesville, Florida. And they wanted 30 acres for the nature center and 250 acres for organized sweating. That means soccer fields, par 3 golf course, volleyball courts, that kind of stuff. I understand the need for exercise, and I understand sports and how wonderful they are and how much people enjoy them and how much they enrich people's lives. But to take pristine wildlife habitat with endangered species living on it, a beautiful, incredible, and intact forest, and putting playgrounds there just didn't make sense to me. I figure that stuff needs to happen on the par 3 golf course, can be put on abandoned farmland just outside of town. Volleyball courts can be put in old abandoned strip malls, just bulldoze them and turn them into a nice park for people to use, and take land that's already been used and abused and put it to use in positive ways. And let's take the nature center and let's give the entire 280 acres of pristine natural habitat, let's turn that over to the nature center and for forever use as wildland where people are invited to come and learn about nature. I talked him into it. The first thing I did in my professional life was save 250 acres of habitat forever. That's a pretty good start. I'm proud of it. At the same time, I was working on the management ideas for how to take care of this beautiful piece of forest habitat. I was also in charge of everything else, making sure the bathrooms were clean, the toilet paper was requisitioned, that we had enough of this and enough of that, and the budget was filled out every year, and I had to go to all the city department head meetings and all of that kind of stuff. And also devise nature programming in this place designed for people to come and learn about nature that had never served that function before. So the very, very first programs for kindergartners, the very first programs for preschoolers, the very first ones for first grade, second grade, fourth grade, junior college students, University of Florida students who came to learn about habitats there, the Older Americans Council, the Audubon Society, the garden clubs. I mean, that was my job. How does somebody my height teach 4-year-olds about nature? I must have been crazy. I don't know why I ever thought that I could do such a thing. But I would greet the kids, and we would walk down the trails like this. So I was seeing the world from their perspective instead of from mine. And the teachers and the parents, they thought I was crazy. No one had ever seen anyone do that. Nature hikes on your knees. But if you had the slightest glimmer of interest in learning about our environment and how to take care of it, then that's what I wanted to do, was teach you about it. It's been my thing forever. Still my thing now. Now I live off in a little cabin in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and I've got a tiny cabin that was originally built in the 1830s in Maine out of hand-hewn timbers, all put together with nothing but wood pegs to hold things in place. A friend of mine had one, didn't need it. I bought it from him, I erected it at my place. It has a projector just like that I can hang in one end of it, It has a screen just like this that I can hang from the other end of it, and over the summer, all of my neighbors come to Ann and Phil's house for their ecology lesson. Okay? If you walk and talk and live and breathe and have the slightest glimmer of concern for the environment, then here I am. I want to talk to you. I want to walk with you. I want to show you stuff. At the same time I was working on this project in Gainesville, the United States Army Corps of Engineers was busy digging a ditch. The idea was to go about as far north as Ocala. You know where that is? North, 30 or 40 miles north of Orlando. And the idea was to dig a ditch from the Gulf of Mexico all the way across to just north of the city of Ocala. And then to follow the Ocklawaha River Basin and then dump into the St. Johns River and follow the St. Johns River all the way to Jacksonville. And this deepened ditch all the way across the state was to be called the Florida Cross-State Barge Canal. And the idea was to take all kinds of stuff, wood chips for paper companies, saw logs from forestry operations, stuff that was dug up out of the ground by people in the mining business, fertilizers, pesticides, gasoline, the chemicals that are needed for different kinds of factories. Instead of going all the way around the tip of Florida and up the East Coast, we'll just come across to here, but take this canal all the way across Florida and right up the coast. And look at all of this fuel that you would save along the way. That was the idea. And the only problem with it, or the sticking problem with it, was this little segment in the middle called the Ocklawaha River. It was like the Loxahatchee, but more so. Wild and scenic, with gigantic trees, much wider floodplain, forest that went off on both sides by a mile and a half or more. This incredibly beautiful place. And the bird watchers thought about a canal dug through the middle of this ecosystem and thought, what would happen to the Parula warblers? These beautiful little birds, this long from tip of their beak to the end of their tail, blue on their back, yellow under here, a little black smudge on the throat of the male, a little broken white eye ring that looked like eyeshadow or mascara above and below the eyes on both sides. Pretty little olive green spot right here in the center of the back. They thought about that gorgeous piece of nature losing valuable habitat. They thought about prothonotary warblers, bright golden yellow birds with black eyes and black beak and dark blue wings, this big, losing their homes. They thought about the barred owls and the screech owls and the great horned owls and the otters and all the other animals who were about to lose their homes. And they didn't like that idea one bit. The hunters and fishermen, they didn't like that idea either. They liked going hunting there. They liked going fishing. The canoeists, they didn't like that idea either. They liked canoeing and canoe camping there. The people who were interested in wildflowers, all the garden clubs, they didn't like the idea either. Nobody seemed to like this idea except the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And so, one at a time, these different groups of people talked to the Corps of Engineers and said, please, 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 save the Ocklawaha. They even made bumper stickers, save the Ocklawaha. Go around it, do the rest of the canal, just do it a different way. Just save this one little 30 or 40 mile stretch of river. And the Corps of Engineers said, we've got our plans. We've got our designs. We've got our permits. We've bought the land. We've bought the rights. We've negotiated with the state of Florida to get the permission. And we are ready to go, and we're not stopping now. It's too late. And they said, but pretty please. And they said, no. And they said, pretty please with Parula warblers on top. And they said, no. So then these folks stopped talking to the Corps of Engineers individually, and they organized among themselves and all got together. Yes, bird watchers and hunters on the same side, as they've always been without actually realizing it. And garden clubs, and fishermen and canoeists, and bird watchers and hunters. And all those people, all on the same side, they all joined their voices together. It was all spearheaded by Alachua Audubon Society, a bird watching group out of Gainesville, Florida. And at the time, I was their education chairman. Of course, who else are they going to get to teach, or to, they had a program for teaching about nature education than Phil Weinrich. They couldn't find anybody any better. I mean, the guy's a fanatic. He's extreme. He wants to do it, dudes. So get him to do it. He'll find time. They pleaded for the birds. They pleaded for the fish. They pleaded for the snakes. They pleaded for the trees. They pleaded for the wildflowers and the vines and the dragonflies and the damselflies and the otters. And the Corps of Engineers said no. And so then they said, well, look. We've had some help, and we've done a map for you. Take a look at this. We found a way to route the canal so that it bypasses the Ocklawaha. It leaves where you've already got the plan started and where part of the canal is already even dug, and it goes around the river using old farmland. Some of it's been abandoned, and some of it is for sale, but it's not going to be that expensive. And look, you could go this way instead of down the Ocklawaha, and save the Ocklawaha and put it there. And the Corps of Engineers said, no. And they said, please. And they said, no. And they said, well, we've done some further studies, and we found out it would be cheaper to go that way, and you can save all kinds of tax dollars. And the Corps said, now would throw away the tax dollars we've already spent, planning to put it where it's going. So it's going where we said. And so finally, this whole thing wiggled its way into court. And in court, there's a judge. This is not the kind of thing that usually goes before a jury, but there's a judge who has to decide who's going to get their way. On one side is the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And there's the guys who run the barges. And they're the guys who run the bulldozers and dig the canal and do all that. And all those people are going to have jobs. And all those jobs mean that they can pay their rent, and they can feed their families, and they can send their kids to soccer camp or to ballet lessons or to karate or wherever they want their kids to go. They can support their families and take care of their needs because the canal was done, and there's economic prosperity and development that happens because of that whole thing. And on the other side, there's pretty little birds. And there's slithery little snakes. And there's big-eyed, cute, brown-eyed otters. I get it. They're wonderful. They're cute. They're lovely things. But you compare wildlife to this family's ability to pay for their rent. You compare jobs to wildlife, and the jobs win. The jobs are going to win time after time after time after time because people come first and dicky birds come last. That's just the way of things. And if you had to decide between whether a rough greensnake would have a home or whether Mr. Lichtig's daughters got to go to karate camp, you'd vote for his daughters before you voted for that snake. And so would the judge. And on top of that, the United States Army Corps of Engineers is backed up by the United States Army. And the United States Army is backed up by the United States of America. So on one side, you've got these huge, powerful organizations with more lawyers than the world will ever need. And more money than you can shake a stick at. And on the other side, you've got these little tree-hugging bird watchers. And they can be in court with you for a while, but then they're going to run out of money to pay their lawyers, and they're going to run out of money to pay their experts. And you've got this gigantic machine backing you up, and they're just struggling on their own as best they can in their little way. And you can just beat them by just beating them. Just wait them out. Eventually you win. Big business wins. Big government wins. It's the way of the world. The little people, they can scream and holler all they want, but the big guy wins. Over and over and over again, that's true. So the little folks stopped fighting their fights alone, and they banded together and became one larger group. And this larger group went to the University of Florida and other such institutions. I know that institution the best because I had spent all those years living in Gainesville and picked up 2 degrees from the University of Florida and sent both of my sons and my daughter there. Okay, so I know the University of Florida story better than other stories. And they went to the forestry department and said, what can you tell us about this program, about this project? Here's what we're thinking, what do you think? And the forester said, yeah, I see your side of things. And they said, well, will you testify to that? And they said, yeah, and how much will you charge us for that? Well, I don't need to charge you for that. I can volunteer my time to do that. And then they talked to the geologists at the University of Florida and at Florida State and other universities and got help from as many places as they could. And those folks said, yeah, here's something you didn't think of. How about this? How about that? How about this? How about that? No, I don't have to charge you. I can volunteer my time for that. And then the law school at the University of Florida, their professors and their top students, they're joined in the whole thing. And the little people here are not going to run out of money because they're not paying anybody. Because these other folks are volunteering their time and volunteering their energy and have been convinced that this is the right way of looking at things, and this is not the right way of looking at things. And the battle got stiffer and stiffer and stiffer, and by the time things got finished, the forestry department in the state of Florida said, no, we don't want your canal. And the Wildlife Commission in the state of Florida said to the United States government, no, we don't want you to spend your money here. We don't want your canal. And the legislature of the state of Florida said to the United States government, don't spend your money here. We don't want your canal. And the governor of the state of Florida said, we don't want your canal. And so finally it went to court big time in Tallahassee. And because I was a member of the board of Alachua Audubon, the group that had started the fight, and the Audubon chapter wanted us to be represented, they sent me to Tallahassee. The lawyer for the state of Florida was the governor himself, Lawton Chiles. He called witnesses. He asked them questions. He presented arguments. The lawyer to protect the state of Florida was the governor himself. That's pretty good. The lawyer for the United States Department or Corps of Engineers was a guy named Colonel Wisdom. Now, how is anybody ever supposed to win a court fight against Colonel Wisdom? I mean, he's got to be the smartest guy there ever was. He's probably got a big W on his chest and a cape. He's probably going to come into, you know, to court in spandex. And the governor called one witness after another, and fortunately never called me. So I did not have to stand up in front of all those bigwig people and try to testify, which would have scared me absolutely to death. And just to give you a sample of what things were like, they called this guy up there, and the governor says, he says, well, Mr. Smithfield, could you tell these folks something you learned in studying this project that doesn't have to do exactly with the Ocklawaha River part of the canal? And he says, sure, I'd be happy to. He walks up in his little cane, his little stooped over body, his little white hair, and his little squeaky voice, and he walks up to the microphone and he says, well, you know, I've been looking at the part of the canal y'all have already dug. The part over there that's to the west of the Ocklawaha River, the part that's already cut through farmland and that stuff. And he says, when you were digging that, you came across some limestone. And you just carved the canal straight through that limestone. Limestone's made out of rock. It ain't gonna collapse. So y'all figured you didn't have to put up any concrete or anything on the sides of it. You didn't have to seal it anyway. I mean, the canal's running through a rock trough. So just cut it through there and leave things the way they are. And he says part of your cost analysis was not lining that canal, and you don't have plans to ever do that. He says, but think about what you have scheduled to come across the canal when the boats finally come through. They're going to be carrying chemicals to paper factories. They're going to be carrying pesticides. They're going to be carrying fertilizers. They're going to be carrying acids for the paper plants. They're going to be carrying all kinds of stuff. And should anything ever happen to one of those barges that it tipped over and spilled its stuff in the canal, now keep in mind, this was before the idea of terrorism. Now you can have that layer on top of the threat of a terrorist attack on a barge in that canal. He said, back even before that was a concern, he said, if anything should ever happen to one of those barges and it tipped over in that part of the canal and spilled its stuff, he said, limestone is porous. That stuff would just go into the water and straight into the pores and straight through the pores and straight down into the aquifer, and it would follow the Floridan aquifer from there toward the south all the way to Kissimmee and Orlando and Okeechobee City and down below that. Most of the southern part of the state of Florida depends on the Floridan aquifer for its water supply, and you would have it filled with contaminants. Way down underneath the ground where you could never hope to get to it to clean it up. And it would stay contaminated for hundreds of years. And every well that belongs to every farmer and every homeowner and everybody in that entire region of Florida, they'd be pumping contaminated water out of the ground. And every municipal water plant would have to clean pesticides or fertilizer or whatever it was that spilled. They'd have to clean it out of there. It would cost you more money than you could ever believe. This is a risk that is so phenomenally outrageous that you should never consider sending a single barge through even the part of the canal you've already dug. It's a dumb idea. You shouldn't have done it. You should not complete this canal. You should quit this project right now before something like that happens. And that's what I've got to say. And Colonel Wisdom stood up and he says, "Well, Mr. Smithfield, I see your name on the list of witnesses." He said, "No, our team never called you up because, well, we never heard of you before and weren't sure what you were going to have to say, and you didn't seem to know anything about the Ocklawaha. The whole thing's a fight over the Ocklawaha, so I don't know why you're talking about this other side of the river." He says, or the canal. He says, "What is it that makes you think you know what you're talking about? Why should we put any stock at all in your testimony? Why should we believe a word out of your mouth?" And the little old man said, "Well, maybe the governor should have introduced me a little better. My name is Dr. Percy Smithfield, and in 1938 I discovered the Floridan Aquifer. I am a professor emeritus of geology at the University of Florida, and I've been studying this aquifer and how it works ever since way before 1938. The entire audience breaks into laughter because Colonel Wisdom has just done the one thing no lawyer should ever do: ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. And this answer was not what he wanted to hear. Colonel Wisdom got this very contrite look on his face, and he sat down. He said, "No more questions," and he sat down. That's the way it went. President Nixon ended up signing a bill that deauthorized the cross-state barge canal. The canal was never finished. It is never going to be finished. The big guys lost. And the little guys won. And part of the reason was because they put it all in terms the judge could understand. It was always jobs and income and economy compared to wildlife. But the testimony included all kinds of stuff. Like, for instance, here's something you may not know about bird watchers. They spend money. They spend money on binoculars and bird books and restaurants and motels and guide services. So do fishermen. Well, maybe not on bird books. Maybe they're buying shotgun shells instead. And fishermen. Okay, maybe they're not buying shotgun shells and bird books. Maybe they're buying fishing gear. But all of these people who have been clamoring about taking care of this incredible river, they all spend money. They spend money in businesses. If the river is there, they will continue to come to this part of Florida. They will continue to spend this money. And those people who provide what they need, they will have jobs. They will be able to send their daughters to karate camp. They will be able to do the same thing as these folks who are building the canal. So all of a sudden, the lawyer is looking at comparing jobs to jobs, money to money. Oh man, it's a balanced playing field now. There's an honest basis for comparison. So then the other testimony comes in. An intact river ecosystem is a gigantic living, breathing sponge. It soaks up rainwater. It stores that water for months and months and months. It dribbles that water down into the ground and recharges the aquifers that provide the drinking water for everybody, whether they like bird watching or not. Whether they want to go to a swamp or want to go to a mall, it doesn't matter, they all need water. And that water's worth something. It's worth dollars and cents. You don't believe it? Go to California. Ask anyone in California what water is worth. And we have the intact Ocklawaha River system helping to preserve and maintain and refresh our water supply. Let's put a dollar value on that, okay? And the economists worked with the geologists, both from the University of Florida, both volunteering their time and expertise and testimony, they worked together to put a dollar value on that, put a dollar value on the soils protected by those forests. These days, they would put a dollar value on how much carbon dioxide is pulled out of the air by that living ecosystem compared to how much carbon dioxide is pulled out of the air by a ditch full of water and barges. You begin to see how they won the fight? I mean, they didn't win it by just crossing their fingers and continuing to talk about pretty little warblers. So the fact is that you're never going to win these fights unless you know the stuff you're learning in this academy. Unless you understand how the environment works, what our benefits are from a living, healthy, functioning environment. You have to be able to put that into words that can be translated into dollars, that can be put on a scale that a judge can balance to decide what kind of decisions to make. The best part of it was by the time the whole thing was done, the United States Congress looked at this whole business and they said, those folks were right. And they passed laws. I forget the name of them, but you probably ran across them in your 8th class. They passed laws that said the United States of America cannot undertake any land-altering project anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world, except perhaps in wartime, without first completing an environmental impact statement. It's not just a matter of comparing how much will it cost to do the project compared to how much will we get out of it. So if you get more benefit than the money you spend, you do the project. If it's going to cost you more than the benefit, then you don't do the project. That's the only scale there ever used to be. Now the scale is, what's it going to cost you to do the project? Plus, how much damage are you going to do to the environment? Add those together and then compare that to how much we're going to get out of the project in other ways. That's how we do things now. That is the law of the United States of America. It started because of a fight that happened right here in your backyard in Florida. Florida has been the leader in environmental awareness for so long, in so many ways. You just have no idea. Most of the wetlands protection laws in the United States are designed after ones that were first passed in Florida. You're in the South. Most people think the South is some kind of backwards, backwater, podunk kind of place and no good ideas ever come out of the South. Well, bull nasty. I don't know whether you liked him as a president or not, but Jimmy Carter, when he decided to run for the presidency, he decided that he would take 1 week out of his time in preparing to be president of the United States. He thought no one should be president unless they understand the environment. So I'm going to go talk to people about the environment, concerns that I should have in my mind, concerns that should be on my platform, concerns that I should take to the American people that are part of my qualification to be president of the United States. And you know where he spent 7 days out of his week in preparing? Florida. Florida. Here. The leadership comes from here. It has for a long, long time. I don't see any reason why it's not going to continue to do so. So now you've got some idea of how you win the fights in court. You have to understand the environment. You have to understand the nitty-gritty, backwards and forwards and inside out, so that you can compare what's going to happen to the environment to what's going to happen to this family's way of supporting themselves. You're going to have to know how to put all of that on the same scale. So I went back to my little nature center in Gainesville and I thought, oh man, I've got to change things. It's not because the world won't get saved because Parula warblers are pretty and because Bambi has soft brown eyes. The world is not going to get saved because of that. It's going to get saved for these other things. So I need to rewrite all the programs. And for first graders, I put together a program called Why Nature Matters to Me personally, Why Nature Matters to Me. And we're going to walk on the trails with 7-year-olds, first graders, and we're going to let them know, okay, what is important about a gopher tortoise? What does it do that makes your personal life better? What is it about a hill of ants? What is it about a mosquito? What is it about a cockroach? What is it about a deer that makes your life better? And just start figuring out those kinds of things so the kids would feel not just a pretty kind of relationship to nature, but a why does it matter to me kind of relationship. And so, of course, we're going to talk about trees. What's good about trees? And they're going to say the things that everyone is going to say. Wood and paper and other forest products and fruit and oxygen. Every kid in America knows that trees make oxygen. You know why? Because their parents woke up one day and said, you know, we really should do some environmental education for our kids. We should make sure they know something about environment. So they take the kid outside and they say, see that tree? Say, thank you, tree, for making oxygen for me. And the kid says, thank you, tree, for making oxygen for me. And done. Okay, done. I have lived up to my responsibility to teach the kid about the environment. Now I can go play soccer or softball in the backyard or whatever else it is we were going to do. Every kid that I've ever met knows that trees make oxygen. They may not know anything else at all, but they all know that. And that's something trees do for you. So we're going to talk about those things. So a busload full of first graders, a class from Stephen Foster Elementary, pulls up to Morningside Nature Center. These little 7-year-olds pile out, and we take a look around the exhibits of the Nature Center, and they all get to hold the snake, and we do all those little touchy-feely things that we always do, and then it's time to go for a walk in the woods. And I know that there is this maple tree that's bright yellow at this time of year with beautiful changing fall colors on its leaves, and we're going to walk around there and see that tree. And we walk around to where the tree was, and I said, now, I want you to think about something, and I want as many answers as you can think of. I said, I want to know what trees do that make your life better. And this little girl raises her hand immediately. And I said, no. I said, I want you to think about it for a minute. I want you to think of all the different ways. And her hand's going like this, and I said, finally, I said, okay. I said, what is it? And she said, I like trees because trees make love. And I looked at her, and it occurred to me by the look on her face and by the way she said it, she wasn't talking about sex. She wasn't talking about the male part of this tree makes a sperm-like thing called pollen, and it drifts through the air or gets carried by an insect over to this female part of this tree over here called an ovary, and inside, and seed comes out and tree. That is not what she was talking about at all. Not at all. She was talking about something that came from here in her. Trees make love. It took a 7-year-old to tell that to me. It took a 7-year-old to make me understand that that is a distinct, absolute, identifiable value of trees that I had never considered once. I was out in the woods with Skippy. He was my dog. He was way before Teddy. We were living in Germany because my father was in the army. And Skippy was barking, barking, barking. And I ran to where he was. And he had found a hedgehog. I have never in my life seen a hedgehog without the help of a dog. And here was this hedgehog. You all know about hedgehogs? He's this little ball of needles sticking out in every direction all the way around. And when he is alarmed and feels threatened, he pulls his nose down to where his navel is and tucks in his arms and legs from the sides. And he's this little round ball with needles sticking out in every direction. If you try to bite any side of him, you're going to get a mouthful of pokey things that don't feel good. They don't come out like porcupine quills, but they feel horrible. They hurt. And so Skippy has been rolling him, trying to get to a side that he can chew on. And every time he rolls him, well, there's another side covered with quills. And by the time I get there, there's this little round compost pile sitting there in the woods. So I pulled the rope out of my pocket, tied Skippy to a tree, got far enough away that I couldn't hear him bark anymore. And then I sat down on the ground. And I put this hedgehog on my lap. And I carefully pulled all the leaves, all the forest leaf litter, off of the quills of this hedgehog until finally all I had was a ball of hurdy little quills. And I held him in my lap and I thought, all right, I don't have to be to lunch for a long time. My mother's not whistling for me now. Nobody's told me about any place I gotta go, any place I gotta be. I'm gonna stay right here until this hedgehog comes out. And I sat there, I was in 4th grade. Sat there on the ground, leaning against a tree, hedgehog in my hands. And I tried with everything in my power not to breathe on him, because my breath might wiggle his fur and make him know that I was there. I didn't talk. I didn't move. I didn't twitch. I tried to control the heartbeat so he wouldn't feel my pulse in my hands. I don't know how much time went by. Because what's time to a little boy with a hedgehog in his hands? But I sat there on the ground, and finally, the quills on this side all folded back this way, and this little head lifted up. And these 2 little glossy black eyes, and this cute little black nose, and this sweet little soft gray pointy face, this little soft hairs off to the sides. He looks up at me and I smiled. And he slammed himself back into his little ball. And I thought, okay, that was cool. We'll see if he comes out again. And I don't know how much time went by this time. But when he finally unfolded himself from his little sanctuary, I made a point not to change any facial expressions. And he looked up at me and decided if I wasn't dead, I at least was no threat. But I wasn't showing any signs of life. And so he unfolds himself completely. And he walks down my arm and down onto my leg and down into the woods and off in between the trees. Oh man. That was one of the very best days ever. You know what I was feeling the entire time? And some little pipsqueak 7-year-old has to tell me that nature makes love? How had that never sunk into my big old stupid head before? So then we talked about paper products, and we talked about trees holding the soil in place with their roots, and trees absorbing air pollution out of the air, and trees absorbing sound out of the air, and trees hiding ugly things. Yes, a 7-year-old taught me that. Trees hide ugly things. Can you imagine how much nasty stuff you'd have to look at if there weren't trees between you and all that stuff that's all around us all the time? Trees are the most amazing thing. And so the next day, a busload of kids from Stephen Foster Elementary School arrives. And the little first graders pile out. And we do our stuff and go for a walk in the woods. And we get to this tree. And I say to them, now what does this tree do that makes your life better? And a hand pops up immediately. And there's this little girl, she's already got her idea in her mind. She's ready to tell it to me now. And this time, I knew enough to know it was time to stop talking and start listening. And I said, what is it about trees that matters to you? And she said, I like trees because they make green. Have you ever stopped to think about what your world would be like without the green of trees? It was just stunning. I am probably the most colorblind person you will ever meet. Don't ask how I identify birds. It just takes some skills that are different from people with good color vision. And I live up in the mountains of North Carolina that has 4 seasons. And in the fall, all my friends and all my neighbors and my wife and everybody around there's, did you see the colors today? They're just magnificent. The trees are all red and gold and orange and it's magnificent. And I say, bull nasty. The trees are all dead. The leaves are turning brown and they're going to fall off the trees and I don't see the orange and I don't see the yellow and I don't see the red and I don't see those golden colors. Autumn is totally wasted on Phil Weinrich. Totally. But I see green. And springtime is my favorite season. And right now at Trillium Woods in North Carolina, that's my house, there are more shades of green than you could possibly count. It is the most wonderful rainbow of colors, all green. And it took a 7-year-old to get me to understand that green is an individual, identifiable, distinct value of trees, and it's as important to me as any piece of paper I ever wrote on, any piece of wood I ever carved with, any gallon of carbon dioxide that was ever pulled out of the air. And I mean, to me personally, that color green is the most amazing thing. I'll stack it against any other value of trees that you can name. It took a 7-year-old to tell me that. And it was right then that I just figured out something that I should have known all along. You will never win the case in court because trees are green, because trees make love. You will never win a case in court because of that beautiful broken eye ring on the eye of a parula warbler, or those beautiful blue wings of a prothonotary warbler. That will never win the case for you in court. You have to know the nitty-gritty of how the environment works. You need to be able to put that together in a way that can be translated to dollars and cents. The most boring, non-flower child thing in the history of the world, dollars and cents. And if you can't do that, you're not going to win in court. But the only reason you're going to be in court is because trees make love, and trees make green, and warblers are beautiful. Everybody I have ever met in my life, everybody I have ever known about who has made any impact on taking care of our environment did so first because of something that happened in here. Aldo Leopold didn't wake up one day and look in a college textbook and see how it all fit together and say, oh, I think I'll take action to protect the environment. No, he lived in a family of hikers and hunters and folks who were out in the wilderness, and he developed a love of nature, and then he saw what was happening, and then the rest of it is history. He took action to protect the part of nature that he cares about. Wildlife photographers, same thing. Bird watchers, same thing. People who love surfing and paddle boarding and deep sea fishing and scuba diving. They do it because there's something out there that they love, that's interesting, that's beautiful, that catches them here. Then they find out what is happening to it, and they decide it's time to take action to protect that stuff. And then it goes to here, and then they get to do this other stuff. You won't win in court unless you know all this stuff. But nobody will go to court. Nobody will raise the flag of alarm. Nobody will take action until they feel it here. So don't worry that you don't know everything an ACE teacher has to teach you about the environment. Everything your APES teacher has to say about the environment. Everything that G. Tyler Miller has to say in his environmental science books about the environment. Don't worry that you don't know all about that. Eventually, you will master enough of it to make a difference. But the most important thing you can do, the most important individual thing you can do right now with the knowledge you've got, is share your love of nature with somebody else. That's where the energy will come from that will save this planet. From people who care about it enough right here that eventually makes them take action here. You understand that? That's the way it is. I did not become a Nature Center director or a JERFSA teacher or a representative of the Alachua Audubon Society at the Cross State Barge Canal. I did not do that because of some ecology class I took at the University of Florida. I was there because of a hedgehog. I was there because I was raised by a mother who always loved me best when I was dirty and my hair was sweaty and I had something wiggly in my hands. And when I was all tidy and nicely dressed and all spit polished, I was just some kid. But when I went to her and said, "Mom, look at this," that's when she liked me best. Because trees make love. Trees make green. That's my story for today.